Austin, thank you so much for coming on today. How you doing?
I'm good, man. Thank you for having me.
Good to hear. Austin Varco, guys, if you weren't already aware, is a professional racing driver from sunny San Diego. He's racing in the Special Needs Copy number 2 Dodge Ram in the NASCAR Advanced Auto Parts Weekly Series, and he'll be racing this Saturday at the Irwindale Speedway for the championship night. Gates open up at 4 o'clock. Austin, thanks for coming on, man. How you doing?
I'm doing great. Yeah, I'm excited for this weekend. We put in a lot of work. The last one was a lot more difficult physically than I thought it was going to be. If you haven't heard my story, this truck thing is brand new to me. I've never raced on an oval before, and so my first race on an oval was July, and I was caught up in a massive wreck on lap one. So my oval racing experience is limited to about one lap going into the race last month. And so I had never turned at Irwindale. I had never turned more than 10 laps in a row. And then I was expected to go out there and race a whole race. And so I thought it was just going to be like a road course race. And I usually make out okay in those races, but man, it was one of the most mentally and physically draining experiences I've ever done. I mean, I came out of the car just buzzing, felt like I was going to pass out. So I have massive respect for the guys that race exclusively on ovals, because it's really, really challenging.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. And I mean, speaking of last race, you did pretty good for yourself, right? How'd you fare up?
I finished third in class. I think seventh overall. I think there were around 20 cars. But the way that our series works, we're in a spec series. So even though my truck is a Dodge, it's supposed to perform at the same level as the Chevys and the Fords. And so in order to keep a balance and make this affordable for people, they have put other classes with us. So we race with cars, so they're bodied to look like I think Chevy Cobalts and whatever the Ford mid-range SUV is, or not SUV, Ford mid-range sedan. Anyway, they are also racing against us. They have a similar power plant, and so they make similar lap times. And so the kinds of racing that you see is really interesting, because you might have a truck like mine that is relatively lightweight and can corner quickly. And then you'll have one of these spec late models, is what they call them, that doesn't have exactly the same suspension, and so it might not corner as quick, or it might corner quicker. And so you get this race where some cars are faster on the straightaways, and then they slow down in the corner. And so the racing is really interesting to watch from a fan perspective. As a driver, you're trying to race your class without interrupting the race going on for another class. And so you're always kind of conscious of the two different battles that are happening at the same time.
Man, yeah, I mean, now that you're saying that, I can understand why you almost passed out. I mean, I can't imagine juggling all that information, right? Because you're having to, make sure that you're racing well, but you gotta take into account all the different variables of like everyone else and how their cars operate. Man, that's tough. And you made it third within your section. That's sick.
Yeah, well, the toughest part. So I had qualified second, and I was 1/10 off of the pole sitter, who I was really proud of that, because the pole sitter won the championship last year and the year before. So he really knows what he's doing. Very talented driver, and I was right there with him. And the way that works on certain race weekends, they'll it's more of a fan thing, but they'll roll what they call an invert, which is where they roll a dice, and if it's a number less than 8, they'll invert whatever that number is to first on their starting position. So let's say you qualify second, and they roll a 5 on the invert. Second now becomes fourth, fifth becomes first, third stays the same. So they rolled an 8, and I was second in class, and so I had to start way down at the back of the mid pack, and so it kind of it just made things more challenging. And I made up one position too on the start, and then it was just a fight until till the end. I mean, I think I was side by side with cars the entire time. So that was it was really good for me because I've never done this before. I mean, I've been side by side with cars and I've raced at a high level, but I haven't raced on an oval. And so, which the skill set, it sounds like you're just going left, but the skill set required to do that, frankly, is ridiculous because you are fighting for hundredths of a second. I mean, that's not an exaggeration, hundredths of a second. And so that could be the difference between putting your tire 6 inches off of a painted white line or 4 inches off a painted white line. And it makes all the difference in the world. It's kind of like if you've been rental go-karting and the track is only 20 seconds. There's a lot of time to be gained between 20 seconds and 19.5. The good drivers can run 20. The great drivers are running 19.5. Well, here, the difference is like running a 20.5 versus running a 20.2.
Definitely. It's small margins to work with there, right?
And everybody's running within 1 second. So at least, I mean, less than that probably. So, I mean, our qualifying spread from first to last, like 20 cars was like, I want to say like 6 or 7 tenths of a second. And so it's competitive to a new level. All these drivers are really talented. It's a feeder series to the more national truck racing. So it kind of operates at a lower cost. It's televised, but not on the big channels. It's kind of a breeding ground for drivers who are trying to make moves in motorsports. So you take this atmosphere that's all young, hungry drivers, and you put them on track together, and it's just a recipe for intensity for sure.
Definitely. A lot of competition, a lot. And going into that, we're coming up into this, next race. It's coming up. Do you have any worries about this race coming in? Because I know about 2 races ago, right? You had a bit of a tumble. So going into this race, are you worried at all?
It's a good question. I tend to not really think about my feelings towards the racing until the day of. I don't know what that is. It could be a survival instinct. It was kind of the same way when I would have tests in school. I would kind of put off the anxiety until I was actually taking the test, for better or for worse. And so not yet is the answer. You're always like nervous before you get in the car. I think that's human. And anyone who says they don't, I think is lying. Because there is a very real risk, and things can go wrong. I think the great thing about my story with this is crashing on lap 1 of my first race due to a mistake that wasn't mine. I mean, I was just an innocent bystander in that one. And I can't usually say that about my crashes, but in this case I was. And knowing that, I think I got it out of the way. I guess that's how I feel better about it, because it was one of those freak things, I think. And so the simple answer is I have a lot to learn, and I'm looking forward to going out there and learning more, especially when it comes to setting up the car and making the car behave the way you want it to. We made it, the reason that it was so difficult this last race was we made a mistake in how we organized our setup. And so we had all our tires off the car, and we switched the 2 rear tires, which doesn't sound like that big of a deal if you're on a street car. But remember, these cars only want to go left. So if you change from the left side to the right side, now you're going to throw the balance of everything off. And now it doesn't want to go left in the rear. And so that made it astoundingly hard to drive. And I didn't know that. I mean, it was one of those things that in a road course car, it might have made a subtle difference, but not a big difference. This made a big difference. So, if we can get the setup right, I think we'll be competitive, and it might be a little easier to drive than before. But yeah, I'm excited.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, that makes your placement all the more like insanely awesome, right? Like despite the fact that you had that extra added bit of challenge that you placed where you did. That's sick.
Thank you. Yeah, it was perseverance, and I was hanging on. I mean, if I'm being honest, I was like, there were a couple moments where I went into the corner and just got elbow to elbow oversteered. Like the car snapped way out, and there's a guy 3 feet up to me, and I'm like, oh my god, I really just don't want to take this poor guy out. So I was fighting it for sure, but yeah.
Definitely. And I mean, that's a testament to you, Austin, how cool of a person you are. You're recounting this story and you're more worried about the person next to you than your own self crashing. Like, that's crazy.
Well, I think, like, I don't know, maybe that's the difference between me and a champion. I would think, like, um, I just want to go out there and learn, and I don't want my learning to have an effect on the people around me. That's how I am. It's not into, I don't think I get to a position of being really competitive until I feel like I'm one of the people to beat. Once you feel like that, you're willing to take those kinds of chances and maybe not be as altruistic about what happens to the other person. I mean, you never want to wreck someone. I don't, at least. Some people do, but I don't. But you might be a little more confident in the way that you can maneuver a car. I'm just not there yet, and so to me, it's just I'd rather play it safe and come home with a clean car and a decent result, and make special needs coffee and everybody else on this car look really good. That's my plan.
No, for sure. And I mean, I can tell you just right now, just, based off of what I'm hearing, you have the champion spirit. You know what I mean? You're like, you have that essence because you're putting in the work. And the coolest part about it is you know where you're at and you're very modest and you're like, listen, I'm trying to get from one place to another. This is my launch pad. I'm trying to learn, and you're doing an incredible job at it. I mean, the last race is a testament to that, and I'm excited to see where you're going to be ended up this race. And with that, I wanted to ask you, what are you most excited about going into this next race coming up?
Most excited. Okay. I'm most excited. What I love about these races are they're close enough to home that my friends and family come out. Typically, I race across the country or in remote parts of California, and so it's really hard to convince my people to come to the race because it means a 3-hour drive there and back. And generally speaking, the hotels are just not inexpensive, and so it doesn't make a lot of sense. And I've always felt that in racing, that's one of the biggest problems, is that the racetracks are too far away. And so this one being in the center of the city in Los Angeles, it's a 20-minute drive for a lot of my friends that I went to school with. So it's always really exciting to see them. And it helps me take my mind off of it. When you're 3 hours away from racing and there's nothing to do, it's very easy to kind of sit and get worked up. You're trying to run through all the different scenarios that can happen. And I find it easier just to distract myself. And so when you have friends, that's awesome.
No, that's great. And we know the importance of having good, social support groups, and obviously having your family there and anyone else who can come out. It's the best, right? It's the best.
Yeah. And I think it makes them nervous. Like some of them, I think some of them are there and they trust me. I think like my mom, she's like a nervous wreck every time I go out there. But I do. I think that in the end of the day, they want to see me go and do what I love to do. So it's good to have that kind of support network.
Definitely, definitely. And I mean, I can imagine, being, it's one thing to see it, online or clips of it or watch it on TV. It's another thing to be there and you're hearing the cars and, it's the whole experience. So I can understand that for sure. And so I wanted to ask you, because I know you had mentioned a little bit of like, your drive and the amount of work that you're putting into this and all of the challenges that you faced. I wanted to ask you, in addition to what you have already mentioned, what are some of the current challenges that you face right now that you think that might be something that you have to worry about or you're thinking about or you're trying to map out going into this next race?
Physical exertion for sure. I do when I'm not doing this, I'm doing endurance racing. So like hour and a half to 3.5 hours in the car. And this is, at least when you have an ill handling car, this is more exhausting than that. I mean, for half an hour or however long our races are, 40 minutes, this is more tiring. And so, it's been really humbling. I don't have this physical strength to do this for longer than that. And so I've really been, the last few weeks, I've actually been exercising a lot and trying to build up to something that, I don't get quite as winded. Because if you lose some of that physicality in a race car, that's when you start to make mental mistakes because you're so tired from what you're doing. And so, that's something that you can't, when you're at that track going those speeds, 100 plus miles an hour, a few inches from a wall or somebody else, you can't afford to make the same mistakes that in an endurance race where you might be pushing like 9/10. You're not going full tilt the whole time. You might be you have more of a cushion in those kinds of settings. So I think getting used to the consequences, which are just maybe a little bit heightened in this versus, and also getting used to the physicality. So like when we're on a banking, and so and it's a progressive banking. We run really high on that. What that means is that as the track goes up, the banking gets steeper, like a bowl. And so at this track, when you run the high line, which is where all our cars run, you're in about 12 degrees of banking. And we're carrying 2 Gs, which doesn't sound like a lot. Formula One guys, they're carrying 5 Gs in a corner. The difference is we're doing that for probably 16 of the 20 seconds per lap. So, we're carrying sustained 2 Gs for 16 seconds times, 50 laps or 40 laps. And so by the end of it, and it's only left. So you're working like this muscle in your neck. That's it. And this muscle is like, I can pinch it with 2 fingers. It's not very big, at least mine isn't. And so you're in this car and your head is on the headrest and you just want it to be over. And I know that I need to do better. I need to be better. So that's something that I've really been working at. And then obviously being a little more focused on how we set the car up and a little more intention behind the choices that we're making.
Definitely, definitely. Wow. I mean, with the way that you're describing it, it sounds intense. I can't imagine. And it's interesting on how you're mentioning that, you're constantly improving. You're constantly trying to make something better. You're constantly doing physically things to yourself to make sure that you are constantly getting better. I mean, that just shows, you've got that champion spirit, man. Like you're putting in the work.
Thank you. Yeah. I mean, the way that I look at it is, and I haven't had this mindset for very long, but the way I look at it is ultimately, I know what level I want to compete on, and I know what those guys are doing, or at least I have an idea of what those guys are doing. And so if I want to compete against those people, I either have to be training at the same level or harder in every aspect. That's the simulator, that's doing PR and media training. That's doing, exercising and all that. So yeah, there's a certain level that I know I know I'm capable of, and I know I want to shoot for that. So yeah.
Definitely, definitely. I mean, for our viewers at home, I mean, just try to imagine that, the intensity of the moment of driving on that track. I mean, I know for me, I don't know how you do it, man. That's like, it's intense. It
Yeah,
is
it is
intense.
very intense. And to be honest with you, sometimes I don't know how I'm doing it either, because I question my life choices sometimes. But in this case, no, in this case, it is a lot of fun. I mean, it is intense, but if it weren't fun, I wouldn't be going back and trying to do it again. So ultimately, that is something that I actually have struggled with the last a year or two, is just showing up to the track and trying to find a balance between being very competitive, which is how I am, and still having fun while doing it. And that's, it used to be easy for me to do that. And you show up and you want to win. And it's really easy to let all the little roadblocks take you down. Um, and for periods of last year there, I had moments at the track where just everything that could go wrong went wrong, and blowing up a transmission every weekend, and you just, it's defeating. It's spiritually defeating. And when you get into those modes, it's really hard. When you're running against, for seventh or eighth place in a car and a track that you can beat everybody. It's if you're a super competitive person, it's very hard to do that and enjoy it. But I've kind of had to do a frame shift when it comes to how I approach racing and what I want to get out of it, and that's been a big focus point for me the last year or two, is how to do this. And no matter where you finish, no matter the results, how to have fun doing it, which I think is a life lesson that everybody could adopt. You don't have to absolutely, this is something I found too. You don't have to absolutely love your job to find out that there are some highlights to it. There are some golden linings that you can take that make your day a little bit easier. That's kind of how I felt, at some races. Some races I'm having a blast and I'm loving being there. Sometimes you're like, I just want to pack it up and go home. And I feel like that's something that everybody experiences all week long when they go to their job. I experience it just on the week too. And it'd be a good thing to better learn how to change my mindset to approach those difficult situations.
Definitely, definitely. And I mean, especially with how you're mentioning, it's it is exhausting in all aspects, right? Physically, mentally, emotionally, right? You're really investing yourself in every capacity to make sure that you're the best that you can be going into these races. And like you said, right? Sometimes, you feel like you could have been better, or there's things happen, and you're like, oh, I wish, and it is, extremely taxing because of the fact that you really put all of yourself into it. And so, I mean, I just commend you for being able to put your entire being out there, right, on the race, and having the things that happen, and for you to pick yourself up and say, you know what, all right, I'm gonna find how to continuously enjoy this. I'm gonna make sure that this is still fun for me. That's super important, dude.
It is, yeah. And I the oval stuff, it feels like I'm drinking through a fire hose every time I go. Every time. It hasn't gotten easier. I've driven this truck probably 5 or 6 times, including all the test days that we've done. And I have moments where I'm like, ooh, this is fun. But usually when I'm having those moments, it's when I'm like kind of goofing off and not actually doing what's fast. And so that's been, it's been hard to focus and just really, I mean, it feels like I'm learning a completely new skill. And so, I don't have the level of mastery yet that I need to have, like, to really enjoy what I'm doing, because I'm still so, like, nervous about making a catastrophic mistake.
Right.
So when that weighs on your conscience, it's kind of hard to um, to let loose. But I'm really trying my best. And there are moments in the race where I'll get carried away and distracted, um, and forget that I'm in a competitive atmosphere, and kind of just have fun. And I'm looking for more of those. I'm just looking for those in a way that's not destructive to my lap times. So, I'm sure I will find that balance at some point in the next year. But yeah, until then.
Definitely. And with that, I wanted to ask you, especially with how you're mentioning how it's so physically and emotionally, mentally exhausting and draining, and being able to try to find the balance in and of it, the entirety of it. I wanted to ask you, how do you prepare for a race? Like, are you preparing, weeks in advance? Are you preparing the day of? You're like, how do you mentally prepare yourself? How do you physically prepare yourself? How do you do it in general? And do you have some sort of a routine or a pre-routine going into the race?
Yeah. Well, prep for the next race begins 5 minutes or less after the race ends, the previous race. You start making a checklist of everything that needs to be done to the car, immediately. And usually you kind of ruminate on, oh, I made this mistake. I should have put my car here. I should have put it there. You start to make those driver corrections, usually the same day or the day after, because that's when it sets in. And then you'll watch your in-car video and make sure, like, that you didn't make other mistakes that you might be able to fix. And once you've done all that, what's typical is a week prior to the race, we do the repairs that we need to make. A week or two, depends on the extent of that. And then as far as race day prep, before I get out there, I'm not incredibly religious, but I was raised Christian, and so I say a little prayer when I've got my helmet on and I'm sitting there and everything goes quiet. And then I guess the closest thing that I have to a ritual, before I go out, I tell my people I love them. And once I'm in the car and I've got the visor down, you kind of you enter, at least I enter, this, like, kind of zen where I'm trying to get as calm as I can and slow my heart rate down. And it's almost the opposite of what you expect. You expect, you want Kickstart My Heart to play in your head, and you're
Like pumped up, right?
But no, it's really just about calming down as much as you can, because you need to have, like, neuro flexibility. You need to be ready to make choices that you hadn't planned on making in those first few laps, at least. And if you're locked in and you're in rock star mode, those are when I think you get into some dangerous situations, because you're too on it. And I think that's why there are crashes on starts, because people are too excited to go and too excited to win the race in the first turn. Whereas you really need to, I think, just calm it down and try to preserve until the end. At the end, you can go Kickstart My Heart mode, but at the beginning, I think it's just about getting calmed down and just making things happen.
Definitely. Well, wow, that is so interesting to learn about, because I always figured, you guys are just, bumping, heavy metal or whatever it is that you need to pump yourself up, but you actually need to, like, have some, tranquility. That is super interesting.
Yeah, a lot of drivers subscribe to that. some drivers, they'll do jump rope or something that requires a fair amount of hand-eye coordination before getting in the car. I should probably do that. I kind of like, I'll roll my wrists out like this, because I kind of, when you're turning the wheel, you'll have one wrist that's doing that, especially if you're going left, that wrist is always there. So it's pretty easy to cramp up those muscles. And I found out the hard way, these cars don't have power brakes. And so when you want to apply the brake to slow down a 3,000-pound vehicle, you're using all of the force you could possibly muster up on the brake pedal. And so, I think this time I'll probably end up like kind of stretching my legs out a little bit more. That way, it's kind of hard when you don't have power brakes. It's really hard to tell when you're exceeding the pressure of the brake pedal to the point that the tire starts to give out, which is called a brake lockup. And so it's very hard to figure that out when you're applying 300 pounds of pressure to the brake pedal, because it's really hard to figure out what 300 pounds is versus 275. So, and 275, you might be safe. 300, you're locking up and sliding. So, I'm trying to get a little bit more strength in my legs to do that, between races, but actually right before the race, I think it would probably be a good idea to do some kind of physical training to figure out, like, okay, this is kind of about what pressure it takes for me to squat, and I'm 140 pounds. And that way you get a little bit more comfortable with pressure on your foot.
Definitely.
Yeah, it's very, very technical.
Yeah. There's so much that goes into into racing. I think it really makes you appreciate, the totality of everything, because it's not just like, oh, I'm driving left. There's a lot of stuff that is going into this, and I commend you for continuously improving your craft, continuously applying the fact that you know that you're learning, that you're learning new skills, and you're trying to make sure that you're still having fun, and there's a lot that goes on with this, and it's going to be super exciting to see you this Saturday too. I mean, to see you actually practice all the things that you're talking about.
If you aren't there to see it live, you can see it afterward. Otherwise, I believe Irwindale has, or the NASCAR, like the weekly series, has its own streaming site. I couldn't tell you the name off the top of my head, but you can watch it live.
Oh, for sure. No, yeah. So I mean, if I'm not able to watch it in some capacity on the live format, I'm definitely watching that YouTube video. So that is sick. And it's good to know for all of our viewers at home that we have a way to watch it after the race. But hopefully we'll see you guys here this Saturday. So Austin, thank you so much again for coming on. I really appreciate all the insight that you've been giving us about all the different intricacies of NASCAR. I feel like I'm more well informed as to all of the stuff that you have to do. While we have you on here, is there anything else that you wanted to plug or you just wanted to mention in relation to your race this Saturday?
Yep, I just wanted to say thank you to Behavioral Autism Therapies and Special Needs Coffee for being on this car and frankly making this happen, because I couldn't do this and go through this without you guys. And I feel like over the last almost 2 years now that we've been working together, it's really been awesome. And so I hope more people see that and connect with that and can trust you guys, because you run an amazing business.
Thank you so much, Austin. I appreciate you. And we want to just say that we're all rooting for you. We're all proud of you. We're all really excited for all, the progress that you've made thus far, and all of the progress that you have yet to make. I mean, I'm thinking you're going to get this first place, personally speaking, just based off of how much you're talking about all of the different corrections that you're making, all the preparation literally right after the race ended. I mean, I think it's a done deal. I think you got this.
I'm gonna do my best. That's what we'll hope for first. Let's do it.
I'm hoping for it. Awesome. Well, thank you again for coming on. I really appreciate you talking to us.
Yeah, thank you for having me. Appreciate you
Awesome.
guys.